I remember the first time she came back from his place for the weekend. She was 12. She tossed her backpack on the floor. And it was the same old backpack, the one with the faded cartoon character. But she was different. She had this new phone, the latest model, something I could never afford. She talked about the shopping trip, the designer clothes he'd bought her, the restaurant, where the bill was probably more than my grocery budget. For the week it wasn't just the things, it was the way she talked about his apartment. View from the high-rise, the pool on the rooftop. Her voice had this new tone, this reverence, like she was describing a castle, and our little house with its creaky floors, and the backyard that needed weeding, suddenly felt very, very small, very shabby. The slight nods. Claire's third birthday party. There I was, younger than she is now, blowing up balloons. The living room was decorated with streamers. You could see a little Claire sitting in a high chair, a paper crown on her head, clapping her hands. I was right there next to her, helping her blow out the candles. The camera panned around the room. There were grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. But one person was missing. My mother's voice from her chair in the living room was soft. He said he had to work, she said without any accusation. Just a simple statement of fact. On the film, little Claire kept looking toward the door. I remember that day. I remember the ache in my heart every time her little face fell when the door didn't open. Another reel started. This one was a Christmas morning. Claire was about 5. Sarah was just a baby. The camera showed a mountain of presents under the tree. The girls were in their pajamas, their eyes wide with excitement. I was sitting on the floor with them, still in my robe, my hair a mess. I was helping Sarah tear the paper off a big box. In the background on the sofa was my ex-husband. He was holding a newspaper. He wasn't watching the girls, he wasn't smiling. He was reading the sports section. The camera lingered on him for a moment, then moved back to us. My mother's voice was gentle. Your mother, she said. She was always the one who made the magic happen. She stayed up half the night assembling toys, stuffing stockings. She never wanted you to miss out on a single thing. Then came a shorter clip. Claire was maybe 7, and she had built an elaborate castle out of blocks. She was so proud she called her father over to see. The camera followed him as he walked across the room. He looked down at her creation, and instead of praising her, he pointed. That tower is a bit wobbly. He said, his voice was flat, critical. It's not very stable. On the film you see the light go out of Claire's eyes, her smile vanishes. I came into the frame, then kneeling down beside her. I think it's a magnificent castle, I said, my voice firm on the crackly audio. It's the strongest castle I've ever seen, and look at these beautiful flags. You drew. The film ended there. The room was silent, except for the hum of the projector. My mother didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. The evidence was right there, unedited, unbiased. It was a historical record, and it told a very different story from the one Claire had been living. The story of a mother who was always there, a mother who was present for the scraped knees, and the bedtime stories for the birthday parties, and the quiet afternoons. The story of a father who was physically absent when it mattered and emotionally absent even when he was in the room. The narrative her father had so carefully constructed over the years, that I was the source of the family's problems, that I had driven him away, that my love was conditional. It just crumbled. It couldn't stand up to the truth shining from that white screen. I could see it happening on Claire's face. It was like watching a glacier melt. The hard, icy resentment began to soften, and underneath was a dawning horror, a confusion. She wasn't just seeing the videos, she was feeling them. Authentic memories, long buried under layers of her father's persuasion, began to flood back. She turned to Sarah, her voice a whisper. Do you remember Mom reading us The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe every night? She did all the voices. Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening. And that time I had the terrible flu, Claire continued, almost talking to herself. Now, she stayed in my room for 3 days. She slept in a chair next to my bed. Then my daughter took the stand. She was 15 now, poised and so cold. She affirmed everything her father's lawyer said. She said she felt more supported at her dad's. She said our home was tense. She used words I knew she'd heard from him. I just want a stable environment. She said, not looking at me. My own lawyer tried to ask gentle questions, to probe a little, but my daughter shut it down. I've already said what I want, she stated, her voice firm. That was the worst moment, hearing her, my own child, echo. She was piecing her own history back together, the real history. She remembered the Halloween costumes. I spent weeks sewing the way I'd always cut the crusts off her sandwiches, because she didn't like them. The nights I'd hold her, after a nightmare, telling her over and over that she was safe. She remembered the constant, quiet, daily acts of love. that are so easy to forget because they form the fabric of your life. And she saw with painful clarity the contrast, the stark difference between the steady, unwavering love I had given her and the conditional performative affection she now received from her father. The narrative hadn't just been manipulated, it had been inverted. The hero and the villain had been switched. The projector was still on, casting a blank white light onto the screen. Claire sat there for a long time, her grandmother's hand resting gently on her knee. She wasn't crying, not really. It was something deeper than that, a reckoning. The entire foundation of her world for the past few years had just been proven false. Finally, she stood up. She walked over to the phone on my mother's side table. Her hand was shaking. She dialed my number. I was at home, probably staring at a book I wasn't reading, when the phone rang. I jumped. I answered, my voice cautious, hello. There was a silence on the other end. Then I heard her breathe in. It was a shaky, tentative sound. Her voice, when it came, was thick with tears she was holding back. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't an explanation. It was something more fundamental, a simple, heartbreaking request that carried the weight of 1,000 unsaid words. Mom, she said, can we watch the rest of the videos together? I helped you pack your bags. I folded your favorite sweaters, the ones I'd bought you for Christmas, and placed them neatly in the suitcase. You were so excited, your hands practically buzzing. As you zipped it shut, you were trading our quiet, predictable life for the one your father had painted for you, a life of constant fun. No real rules, a cool stepmom who was more of a friend, and a house that was always buzzing with energy. He sold it to you like it was an upgrade, and I guess to a teenager it sounded like one. Our life here, with its homework schedules and chores and early curfews, must have seemed so dull in comparison. I tried to warn you, you know. I said, honey, every family has its challenges. It might not be the non-stop party he's describing. But you just looked at me with this pitying look, like I just didn't get it. You thought I was jealous. You thought I was trying to hold you back from a better life. So I stopped. I helped you pack. I hugged you tight at the door, and I watched you get into his car, and my heart broke into 1,000 little pieces right there on the doorstep. His lies so convincingly, it felt like a death. I kept my face still. But inside I was crumbling. This was it. I was going to lose her forever, right here in this quiet, awful room. For the first few weeks my phone was my lifeline. Your social media was a constant stream of perfect pictures. There you were, all of you at a baseball game, matching jerseys. There was a photo of you and your stepmom Sarah getting manicures, another one of the whole family around a fancy fire pit in their backyard laughing. You looked so happy, radiant. It was the life you'd wanted. And for a little while it seemed you had it. I'd text you, how are you, sweetie? And you'd reply with short, breezy messages, great, so busy having the best time. I tried to be happy for you, I really did. But every time I saw a picture of you all together, it felt like a confirmation that the problem had been me all along, that our life was the boring one, that he could offer you something I couldn't. Then the pictures started to change. They became less frequent. The captions got shorter. The glow from those first few weeks began to fade. And I could see it even through a screen. You stopped being in the center of the photos. You were often on the edge. I'd see a picture of your dad and Sarah, their arms around each other, and you'd be slightly off to the side, or a photo of Sarah's 2 kids, your step-siblings, opening piles of presents on a birthday, and you'd be in the background just watching. You started to look less like member of the family and more like a visitor, a guest, in the house you thought would be your new home. Your sister Chloe would go for her weekend visits and come back quiet. She's younger, she sees things without the filter. At first she'd just say little things, it's really loud there, or they order pizza a lot. But then the stories started to get more specific. She told me you were always the one clearing the table after dinner, that Sarah would ask you to load the dishwasher while she took her own kids out for ice cream. Chloe said one time she heard Sarah snap at you for leaving a towel on the bathroom floor. But her own daughter's room was always a mess, and she never said a word. She said you spent a lot of time in your room with the door closed. She said you seemed lonely. The story that really got to me was about your choir concert. You'd been practicing for weeks. You told me about it before you moved out, how excited you were for the solo part. Chloe told me you'd reminded your dad about it all week. But that night, Sarah's son had a last-minute basketball game. He just had to go to a championship or something, and your dad, he went to the game. He chose the basketball game over your concert. Chloe said you came home after your performance and went straight to your room. You didn't even come out for dinner. When I heard that, I had to physically stop myself from calling him, from screaming at him. My hands were shaking. But I knew if I said anything, if I tried to intervene, you might see it as me trying to ruin things again. I had to wait, I had to let you see it for yourself. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, just sitting here offering sympathy when you called, but never ever saying I told you. So I was just a soft place for you to land when you needed it, waiting for the day you realized you needed to land. That day was 6 months later. It was a Tuesday evening, raining hard. I was paying bills at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang. It was an odd time for anyone to be visiting. I opened the door, and there you were soaked, your hair plastered to your face. But it was the tears mixing with the rainwater that made my breath catch. You were standing there, a suitcase at your feet, the same one I'd packed for you half a year ago. You were shivering, you looked younger than your age, and utterly broken. But then his lawyer got overconfident during cross-examination. He kept pushing. He wanted to completely demolish my character. He asked my ex-husband to confirm under oath that he had always been the primary caregiver, even during our marriage, that he was the constant, reliable one, and my ex, buoyed by his own performance, agreed. He painted himself as a saint. That was the first crack. My lawyer saw it. She stood up slowly. You didn't say anything at first, you just started to cry, these deep, ragged sobs that seemed to come from a place I hadn't heard. Since you were a little girl, I pulled you inside out of the rain and wrapped my arms around you. You clung to me like you were drowning, your whole body was trembling. I led you to the couch and held you while you cried into my shoulder. The smell of rain and your familiar shampoo filled the space between us. After a long time, the sobs subsided into shaky breaths. You pulled back, wiping your eyes with the back of your hand. You looked at me, and your eyes were so full of pain and a kind of humbled understanding that it broke my heart all over again. Your voice was small, crushed. It wasn't what he said it would be, Mom. You took a shaky breath. It was all a show for me, and for you, and for everyone. Once I was there, it was different. You told me everything then. The words poured out of you. You told me how Sarah was nice to you, only when other people were around, how in private she was cold, critical of little things, how she made it clear that her children came first, that their schedules, their needs, their lives were the priority. You said you felt like you were constantly tiptoeing around, trying not to be a burden. You told me about your dad. That was the part that seemed to hurt the most. You said he saw it. You knew he saw how Sarah treated you differently, but he never said a word. He'd just give you a weak smile, a helpless shrug. He was so desperate to keep his new perfect family peaceful that he let you fade into the background. You said you felt like a ghost in that house, a relic from his past life that didn't fit into the new picture. I just felt so alone. You whispered, your voice cracking in a house full of people. I have never felt more alone in my entire life. I didn't say I told you so. Those words never even crossed my mind. All I felt was this overwhelming wave of sorrow for your pain and a fierce protective love. I just held you tighter. I smoothed your wet hair back from your face. You're a home now, I said, my voice steady, a rock for you to hold onto. You're a safe, you're a home. And that was all that needed to be said. You've been back for a few months now. Something is different between us. It's not just mother and daughter anymore. It's deeper than that. We talk more, really talk. You help me with dinner without me asking. You look at me sometimes, and I see a new respect in your eyes, and understanding that was forged in the disappointment of that other house. You appreciate the quiet rhythm of our life. Now the stability, the fact that this is your home, truly your home, where you never have to earn your place. The other day you were setting the table for just the two of us, and you looked around the kitchen and said, it's good to be home, Mom. And you meant it. You finally saw that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Sometimes the most beautiful green is right where you started. You just have to be away from it for a little while to really see it. The arrangement was brittle. You could feel it in the air. Every time we did the handoff, it was my weekend. But it agreed to let them go to their father's on Saturday afternoon for some family thing on his side. A compromise. I thought it might help. It didn't. Sarah, my eldest, stood by his car. Her arms crossed, her backpack slung over one shoulder like a weight she was tired of carrying. She was 16, and every inch of her was a monument to her anger at me for the divorce, for breaking the perfect picture she had in her head. She wouldn't even look at me. Chloe, my younger one, was different, 12 years old, and she carried her own quiet weight, her asthma, severe asthma. I had her emergency inhaler in my hand, the familiar red case, a little worn from use. I held it out to Sarah. Make sure Dad has this. Don't let him just toss it in a bag. It needs to be where he can get to it immediately. She started with simple questions. You travel frequently for work. Is that correct? He agreed. And during these trips, which can last for several weeks, who is primarily caring for your daughter, he hesitated. Well, she's a mature girl. She has the nanny. He never mentioned a nanny before the judge leaned in. My lawyer asked for the nanny's name, her contact information. The confidence on his face began to waver. It was a tiny thing, but the facade had a fracture. Sarah rolled her eyes. The sound was almost audible. Mom, it's fine, you always do this, you act like he's some kind of idiot. It's just an inhaler. It's not just an inhaler, Sarah. You know that if Chloe starts wheezing, if she can't catch her breath, this isn't a suggestion. It's the first step. He knows the drill. He gets distracted. He doesn't get distracted, Ure, just controlling. You can't stand not being the one in charge of everything. Her words were sharp, practiced. Said some version of them. A dozen times, I felt that familiar ache in my chest. The one that was part hurt, part fear. She saw my worry as a weapon I used against her father, not as a shield I held up for her sister. I looked at my ex-husband Mark, leaning against his car, scrolling through his phone. He gave me a quick dismissive wave. We're good, Claire, I've got it, stop worrying. He always said that, stop worrying, as if worry were a switch I could flip off. He never understood that my worry was a direct result of his casualness. The times he'd forgotten to pack the nebulizer medication. The time he'd taken Chloe to a dusty old antique fair and had a mild attack because he'd forgotten to check if her inhaler was in his pocket. To him, it was an inconvenience. To me, it was the fragile line between a normal day and a trip to the emergency room. I forced a smile and handed the inhaler to Sarah. Please, just keep an eye on her. She took it without a word and got in the car. Chloe gave me a small nervous wave from the passenger seat. Then they were gone, and the silence they left behind was thick with all the things we hadn't said. The call came at just after 3 in the afternoon. My phone vibrated on the kitchen counter, and I saw Sarah's name. My first thought was annoyance. She was probably calling to ask if she could stay at her dad's an extra night, and it'd have to be the bad guy, and say no because routine was important. Because we had plans, I was already preparing my refusal when I answered. But it wasn't Sarah's voice I heard first. It was the sound of ragged whistling breathing in the background. A sound I knew intimately, the sound of air fighting its way through constricted airways. It was Chloe. Then Sarah's voice, high-pitched and trembling with a panic I'd never heard from her before. Mom, something's wrong with Chloe. My entire body went cold. What's happening? Is she using her inhaler? Then my lawyer called her my younger daughter. She was only 13. She looked so small walking to the witness stand. She had to promise to tell the truth. She was clutching the sleeve of her sweater, her knuckles white. His lawyer objected, saying she was too young, easily influenced, but the judge allowed it. I can't find it. Dad's not here. He went to play golf. He said he'd be back by 4. But he's not answering his phone. Mom, she can't breathe. The fear in her voice was a live wire. I could hear Chloe gasping in the background. A horrible, weak sound. Sarah, listen to me. Where are you? In the living room. She was just sitting on the couch, and then she started coughing, and now she's really bad. Okay, I need you to be calm. Is she blue? Are her lips or fingernails turning blue? A frantic pause. No, not yet, but she's really struggling. Good, that's good. My mind was racing, but my voice was steady. This was the drill. This was the fear I lived with. And now I was inside it. I need you to sit her up. Make sure she's leaning forward a little, hands on her knees. If she can, it opens up her chest. Don't let her lie down. I was already grabbing my car keys, my purse. Moving toward the door. I am getting in the car right now. I will be there in 10 minutes. Do not hang up. Put the phone on speaker and set it down. Talk to her. Tell her I am coming. Tell her to focus on breathing out. Slowly, just focus on getting the air out. I heard the rustle of the phone being set down, and Sarah's voice trying to sound brave. Mom's coming. Chloe, just listen to her. She's coming. Then the awful whistling struggle for breath filled the speaker. Each gasp was a knife in my heart. I threw the car into reverse and sped out of the drive. The 10-minute drive felt like an hour. I kept the phone on the passenger seat, my connection to that terrifying scene. I gave instructions, my voice a calm anchor in the storm of their panic. Sarah, check the time. How long has this been going on? I don't know. 5 minutes, maybe more. It feels like forever. My lawyer's voice was soft, gentle. Sweetheart, can you tell us what it's like when your dad is away on his trips? She was silent for a long time, just looking down at her hands. Then she started to talk, her voice so quiet the judge had to ask her to speak up. She talked about the empty apartment, the nanny who mostly stayed in her own room, the frozen dinners the nights she was scared, and would call me, and I'd talk to her, until she fell asleep. She said her dad promised to be there for her ballet recital last. Okay, I am 5 minutes away, is she any better? No, she's getting worse, Mom, she's really scared. I could hear it in Chloe's breathing. The wheeze was tighter, the gaps between breaths shorter. This was progressing fast. The inhaler was supposed to be the first line of defense. Without it, we were already at the second. The hospital. Sarah, listen. When I get there, we are not waiting, we are going straight to the emergency room. I need you to have her shoes ready. And a jacket, can you do that? Yes, her voice was small, a child's voice again. I pulled up to Mark's house with a screech of tires. The front door was unlocked. I burst into the living room. The scene was exactly as I'd imagined. Yet 1,000 times worse to see. Chloe was on the floor, propped against the couch, her small body heaving with the effort to breathe. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. Sarah was kneeling beside her, clutching her hand, her own face streaked with tears. I didn't hesitate. I went straight to Chloe, my hands on her shoulders. I'm here, baby, I'm here. I looked at Sarah's shoes, jacket, now my tone brooked no argument. She scrambled to obey. I scooped Chloe into my arms. She was light, but her distress made her feel heavy. Her breathing was a frantic rasp against my neck. We're going to the hospital, you're going to be okay. I carried her to the car, Sarah trailing behind us, clutching Chloe's jacket. I got Chloe settled in the backseat, buckling her in, while Sarah got in the other side. Then I drove like I've never driven before. Every stop sign, a suggestion, every red light, a negotiation. My focus was absolute. In the rearview mirror, I saw Sarah holding Chloe's hand, whispering to her, her eyes glued to me. She was watching me. She was seeing what it looked like to take charge, to be the one who knows what to do when everything is falling apart. We got to the ER entrance. I ran in yelling for help. My daughter is having a severe asthma attack. She can't breathe. Within seconds, there were orderlies with a wheelchair, a nurse assessing Chloe. With a quick professional glance, they whisked her away. And I followed with Sarah clinging to my side, now her earlier defiance completely gone, replaced by a raw need for my strength. The flurry of activity in the treatment room was a blur. Oxygen mask, steroids, a breathing treatment. The hiss of the nebulizer was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I stood by Chloe's head, stroking her hair, telling her she was brave, that the medicine was working. Sarah stood on the other side of the bed, not touching her sister, just watching, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Spring, but he was in Paris. He promised a trip to Hawaii for her birthday, but it got cancelled for a business meeting. It was maybe 20 minutes later, when Chloe's breathing had finally started to ease into a more normal rhythm, when the color was returning to her face, that Mark finally arrived. He burst through the curtain, his face flushed, still wearing his golf shirt. What happened? I got all your messages. My phone was on silent in the golf. He looked from Chloe, sleeping now from the exhaustion and the medication, to Sarah, whose face was a mask of cold fury. To me, I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. There were no words adequate for the chasm that had opened between his reality and mine. He started with his excuses. I told you I'd be back by 4. It was just a quick 9 holes. How was I supposed to know this would happen? Sarah spoke, then her voice low and shaking, but clear. You were supposed to be there. You were supposed to have her inhaler. Mom told you, she always tells you. He looked at her, stunned. Sarah, honey, it was an accident. No, she said the word final. It wasn't an accident. Is forgetting to buy milk. This is you. She turned away from him and looked at me. Her eyes were redrimmed, but the clarity in them was new. It was the clarity that comes from seeing the truth stripped bare of all excuses. The nurse came in to check Chloe's vitals and told us they were going to keep her for a few hours for observation. Mark fumbled with his words, offering to go get coffee, to make some calls. His presence was suddenly superfluous, a nuisance. I just nodded, not really listening. My focus was on my daughters. Eventually, he left, his excuses trailing behind him like a bad smell. The room was quiet save for the steady beep of the heart monitor and Chloe's peaceful, medicated breathing. Sarah had pulled a chair close to the bed and was just sitting, watching her sister sleep. The anger that usually hardened her features was gone. In its place was a profound, weary relief. She didn't say she was sorry. She didn't need to. After a while, she got up and came over to where I was standing. She didn't look at me, but she leaned her head against my shoulder. Her body leaning into mine for support. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched me in months. It was a gesture of pure unspoken trust, a surrender of her grudge, not because I demanded it, but because she had witnessed the alternative. She had seen the terrifying void of his absence, and she had felt the solid, unshakable ground of my presence. Then came the part that broke the room. My lawyer asked, "What happens when you try to talk to your dad about feeling lonely?" My younger daughter's face just crumpled, a tear rolled down her cheek. "He gets angry," she whispered. "He says I am being ungrateful. He says he works hard to give us this life. And I am a spoiled brat if I complain." She started crying in earnest. Then soft hiccuping sobs. "He said if I didn't like it I could go live with mom full-time and be." I put my arm around her, and we stood there together, the two of us watching over the third. The fragile peace was broken. But in its place was something stronger, something forged in the panic of a Saturday afternoon, in the sound of a struggling breath, in the quiet hum of a hospital room. It was the simple, undeniable truth of who showed up and who didn't, and in that truth, everything else finally quietly fell into place. I could always hear the money in his voice when he called her. It wasn't just the promises of weekend getaways or the newest phone. It was the tone, that casual, effortless authority that comes from knowing your check will never bounce. "Don't worry about the cost, sweetheart. I've got it." He'd say it so easily, and I'd be standing in the kitchen holding a dish towel, mentally calculating how many extra shifts I'd need to pick up just to cover her senior year trip. He framed it as generosity, overflowing, abundant love. But I felt its sharp edges. It was a weapon meticulously calibrated. He never outright said I was failing. He just made my life look like a failed state in comparison. His stability versus my scramble, his certainty versus my constant recalculations. He'd ask her, "Is your mom's car still making that noise? Or that neighborhood safe enough for you to be walking home?" Questions that sounded like concern, but landed like judgments. He was building a case, and the evidence was my entire life. And my smart, practical girl, she fell for it, not out of greed. I truly believe that out of a cold, hard look at her future. She was 17, staring down college applications, student loans, a whole life waiting to be funded. She saw a clear path with him, a smooth paved highway. With me she saw a winding, uncertain road full of potholes. One evening, she told me she thought it made more sense to live primarily with her dad for her last year of high school. "It's just easier, Mom, for everything, for school stuff, for getting ready for college." She couldn't even look at me when she said it. She chose the provider. She made the rational choice. And it broke my heart, because I couldn't argue with the logic of it. My love didn't have a price tag she could factor into her spreadsheet. The house was so quiet. After she left, the silence was a physical presence. I tried to fill it with work, with cleaning, with anything. It was during one of these desperate organizing sprees, trying to reclaim some sense of order, that I found the folder the college fund we'd set it up together years ago, when we were still a we, when our signatures sat side by side on the account paperwork. It was supposed to be our one act of unity for her future. I was the custodian, he was the main contributor. I hadn't looked at the statements in a while. The quarterly reports just came in the mail, and I'd stack them up, telling myself I'd get to them. A part of me didn't want to see the growing number a testament to his success that I couldn't match. But that day, I opened the most recent one. The balance seemed off. I pulled out the older statements, my fingers getting clumsy. I laid them out on the kitchen table, the Formica cold under my palms. I did the math again and again. A substantial amount was missing, not a small dip from a bad market quarter. This was a series of withdrawals, 5,000 here, 10,000 there, over the last 8 months. Nearly $40,000 had vanished. My blood went cold. I called the bank, my voice thin and tight. I had to go through security, repeat my social security number, my mother's maiden name. The customer service representative was polite, detached. She confirmed the withdrawals. They were all electronic transfers initiated from his online profile. She couldn't tell me where the money went, only that it was gone. I hung up and just stared at the papers, the numbers swimming in front of my eyes. $40,000. That was a year of tuition, that was. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could hear the hum of the lights. My lawyer didn't say anything else. She just let those words hang there. Then she approached the bench. She submitted a file into evidence. It was a copy of the nanny's log, which we'd subpoenaed day after day, entries noting the father's absence, entries about my younger daughter's anxiety, her calls to me. There was a text message exchange he'd had with the nanny complaining about his daughter's neediness. The evidence wasn't dramatic, it was mundane. books and housing, and the freedom for her to focus on her studies, instead of drowning in debt. I spent the next week in a fog of sickening discovery. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. His social media was a public parade of his new life. There was a photo of him tan and smiling on a sleek speedboat. I'd never seen before. The caption needed something to enjoy these Caribbean waters, new boat living life. Another post showed his girlfriend, a woman named Chloe, flashing a diamond bracelet. When you see something that matches her eyes, he'd written the dates aligned perfectly. The boat purchase coincided with a $15,000 withdrawal, the weekend in Paris, another $5,000, the luxury sedan, the designer handbags. It was all there. He wasn't just spending his money, he was spending her money. He was funding his midlife crisis with his daughter's future. The dilemma was a cage. If I told Maya, I knew I'd be the villain, the jealous ex-wife, trying to ruin her relationship with her father. She'd defend him, she'd push me away for good. But if I stayed silent, I was complicit. I was letting him betray her, letting him steal from her, while she smiled for his camera, oblivious. I had to choose between losing my daughter's affection and failing in my duty. To protect her, I chose the truth. I made copies of everything, the bank statements with the damning withdrawals highlighted yellow, the screenshots of his social media posts with their boastful captions. I assembled it all into a neat, cold, factual package. There would be no hysterics from me, just the evidence. I asked her to come over for dinner. She was hesitant, said she had plans with friends. I told her it was important. When she arrived, she was already guarded, phone in hand. I didn't make a big meal. I just made her favorite sandwich the way she liked it. We ate in near silence. Then I pushed my plate away and slid the folder across the table. She frowned. What's this? It's about your college fund, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I was doing some organizing, and I noticed some discrepancies. I think you should look. She opened it. I watched her face, the initial curiosity, then the confusion as she scanned the numbers. This can't be right, there's money missing. It's right, Maya, I called the bank. That was the beginning. The invitations started to overlap with our time, a concert on a Friday night. I was supposed to have her a weekend trip to a ski resort. He'd call her directly, and I'd hear her side of the conversation from her room. Yeah, Dad, of course. I can go, it's fine. It was never fine with me. But saying no felt like I was depriving her, like I was the obstacle to her happiness. I was the one who had to enforce the rules, make sure homework was done, set a bedtime. He was the vacation. And that's what made it so devastating. It was just the truth, the boring, neglectful truth. Well, there's got to be an explanation, she said, her voice rising defensively. Maybe it was a mistake, a bank error. Dad would never. He's the one who's always talking about this fund. I thought so too, I said softly. Turn the page. She did, and there they were, the photos, the boat, the vacation, the car. Her eyes darted from the withdrawal amounts to the dates on the screenshots. The color drained from her face. No, this is photoshopped. Or something. You're lying. You've always been jealous of him. You're trying to turn me against him. She was shouting now, tears of anger springing to her eyes. My heart was cracking, but I kept my composure. I reached into the folder and pulled out the final piece of paper. It was the transaction detail from the bank, the one I'd had to request specially. It showed the electronic transfer, the exact amount, and the recipient's account name. It was his personal checking account. It's not a mistake, Maya. The money went directly to him. He moved it, he spent it. The fight went out of her all at once. She slumped back in her chair, the paper fluttering from her hand, onto the floor. She looked from the proof to my face, and I saw the horrible understanding dawn in her eyes. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the lie, the grand performance of being the perfect provider, the reliable dad. While he was quietly dismantling the very future he promised to protect, the man she thought was her rock had been standing on a foundation of sand. Her face crumpled. The tears weren't angry anymore, they were deep, shuddering sobs of betrayal. She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she whispered, all those things. He bought me the laptop, the trip to New York. Was that my money too? I didn't have an answer. I just reached out and put my hand over hers. That night we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. She talked about the pressure she felt to be grateful to him, to perform the role of the happy daughter who appreciated all his lavish gifts. I told her about the sacrifices that didn't have a logo, the overtime I worked to make sure she had health insurance, the winter coat I went without so she could have the right brand of sneakers that year, the quiet, constant worry about bills that I kept to myself so she could just be a kid. She looked at me, her eyes redrimmed. But clear, you never let on, you never made me feel like a burden. You were never a burden, I said, you were my purpose. I didn't look at my ex-husband, I looked at my older daughter, I watched her. As her sister testified, I saw the color drain from her face. She was staring at her sister, really seeing her for the first time in years. She heard the pain, the loneliness that she herself had been too busy, too seduced by the glamour to notice. When the nanny's log was mentioned, her head whipped around to look at her father. I saw the dawning horror in her eyes. It was a slow motion. Collapsed the glittering castle she thought she was living in. She finally saw it, the difference between his showmanship and my sacrifice. He provided a spectacle. I provided a foundation. His love was a flashy, expensive firework, bright and loud. And then gone. Mine was the ground beneath her feet, the steady, unglamorous thing she could always stand on. He had traded her security for a moment of applause from a girlfriend, for the admiring comments on a social media post. She didn't go back to his house that night. She stayed with me. We sat at that table for hours, not saying much, just being together in the wreckage. The betrayal was immense. But in its wake, something new was forming, an alliance, a partnership. We started making new plans, not based on the fantasy of limitless wealth, but on the reality of what we had. We looked at state schools, scholarship applications, budgeting for an apartment. It was harder, messier, infinitely more real. The value of a thing isn't its price, it's the integrity behind it. He gave her presence, I gave her my presence. And in losing the illusion of his support, she finally found the unwavering truth of mine. Our future wouldn't be paved in gold, but it would be built on honesty, and that we both understood was the only provision that really mattered. The cap and gown were so dark against her skin, a deep royal blue. She looked like a queen standing there in the crowd of other graduates. But she was my queen, my Sarah. I remember the feeling in my chest, this overwhelming, quiet pride. It was a physical thing, a warmth that had been building for 18 years. It wasn't loud or showy. It was the feeling of remembering all the late nights, the flashcards for biology exams spread across the kitchen table, the drives to soccer practice at 6 in the morning, when the world was still dark and quiet. The times I'd pick her up from a party where she felt left out, and we'd just sit in the car in the driveway, not saying anything for a while, because she knew I was there. He showed up just before the ceremony started, of course. He did. Robert always had a sense for the grand entrance, for the moment when the real work was done, and the applause was about to start. He was wearing a new suit, I noticed, sharp, expensive. He gave Sarah a huge theatrical hug, the kind that's meant to be seen by everyone around you. And he said so loud, "That's my girl. I knew you had it in you." I saw Sarah smile at him, a little uncertain. But she was happy. Her older sister Chloe was right by his side, beaming. Chloe always was a daddy's girl. Even after everything, she's older. She remembers a different version of him, I think, or maybe she just remembers the idea of him better than the reality. We found our seats. The sun was bright, and the folding chairs were uncomfortable. But I didn't care. I was just watching. Sarah's profile in the distance, waiting for her name to be called. Robert was leaning over to me, talking in a low voice. She really pulled it together at the end, didn't she? I told her, just buckle down. I am glad she finally listened to me. I just nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. Buckle down. He said that once over the phone when she was failing calculus. Meanwhile, I was the one who found the tutor. I was the one rearranged my work schedule to get her there. I was the one who quizzed her every night until she finally understood the concepts. But that was always the way. He'd swoop in for the final pep talk and take credit for the entire recovery. Then it was time for the parent speeches at the restaurant afterward. We were all in a private room, family and close friends. The air was thick with celebration, and the smell of good food. Robert stood up, clinking his fork against his glass. He had that look on his face, the one I knew so well. The spotlight was his glass, and it was shattering all around her. The illusion he had so carefully constructed, the narrative that he was the perfect provider, and I was the problem, it just evaporated in that room. She had believed him, she had fought for him, and the entire time he had been lying to us all. He started talking about Sarah's journey. He talked about her determination, her intelligence. And then he started talking about his own role. He said, "I always knew she could do it. I remember sitting with her for hours on those tough math problems." He never did, not once. He was on a business trip when she had her big trigonometry crisis. He said, "I told her you have to make sacrifices for what you want." And I thought of the sacrifice I made turning down the promotion at work, because it would have meant less time to help her with her college applications. He said, "We weathered every storm together. The word hit me like a punch. There was no we, there was me alone in the house weathering the storms while he sent checks and occasional encouraging texts. I kept my smile plastered on my face. It felt brittle, like it might crack at any second. I looked around the table. Everyone was nodding, smiling at him. They were buying it. They saw this generous, involved father. They didn't see the man who missed her 16th birthday because a can't-miss client dinner came up. They didn't see the empty chair at her choir concerts. I felt myself getting smaller and smaller in my seat, invisible. All my work, all my quiet support, it was just erased with every word he said. He was stealing a piece of my pride, and Chloe was watching him with this look of pure admiration. It was the final twist of the knife. And then I saw my younger daughter Maya shift in her chair. She was staring at her plate, her jaw tight. She's always been the fiery one, the one who feels everything 10 times stronger. She's 15, all raw nerve endings. And a fierce sense of justice. She'd been quiet all day. But I could feel the tension radiating off of her. Robert was in the middle of a story about how he helped Sarah choose her college, which was a complete lie. That was a months-long process between me and Sarah. When Maya pushed her chair back, the legs scraped loudly against the floor. The room didn't go quiet all at once. Robert kept talking for a second, but then he trailed off because everyone was looking at Maya. She stood up, her hands were clenched into little fists at her sides, her face was pale but her eyes were blazing. She didn't look at anyone but him. Her voice was shaky at first, but it got stronger with every word. That's not true, she said. The room was utterly silent now. You could hear the ice melting in someone's water glass. None of that is true. Robert tried to laugh it off. Maya, sweetheart, sit down, this isn't the time. No, she said, her voice firm. This is exactly the time. You weren't here for any of that. You didn't sit with her for math. Mom did every night you were in Chicago. She turned to face the room, to face all our friends and family. He missed her 16th birthday. He was at a client dinner. Mom baked her a cake. And all of us girls watched movies together. He didn't help her choose a college. He sent a text message with his top 3 choices. And they were all wrong for her. The legal outcome was almost an afterthought. The judge granted me primary custody of my younger daughter. Immediately, for my older daughter, given her age, the judge ordered family therapy. He saw through the performance. The gavel came down. But the real verdict had already been delivered in the silence between my daughters. She took a breath, and it was like she was unleashing everything she'd stored up for years. Who drove her to soccer at 6 in the morning, for 4 years. Mom, who stayed up with her when she was crying, because she felt overwhelmed. Mom, who helped her write every single one of those essays that got her into this school. Mom, you just show up at the end and take a bow. She looked right at Robert, and her voice dropped. But it was even more powerful. You don't get to do that. You don't get to take credit for her or for Mom. The silence that followed was heavier than any noise I've ever heard. It was a physical weight pressing down on the room. Robert was just staring at her, his mouth slightly open. The charming facade was completely gone. All that was left was shock, and underneath it, a kind of naked embarrassment. He was exposed right there, in front of everyone. He wanted to impress his own daughter, had torn down the entire illusion. I looked at Chloe. Her face was a mess of emotions. First, there was shock, then embarrassment for her dad, a flush creeping up her neck. But then, as she looked from Maya's defiant face to my probably stunned one, something else happened. I saw the confusion in her eyes, and then a dawning clarity. It was like watching a puzzle piece click into place. She was remembering things, the times she called me because Dad was too busy, the weekends he promised to take her somewhere and canceled. She was looking at Robert not as her hero but as a man who had just been caught in a lie, a big, public, humiliating lie. The spell was broken when someone coughed. The guests shifted in their seats, not knowing where to look. The applause they had given Robert earlier felt like a distant, hollow memory now. There was just this uncomfortable, truthful silence. Robert slowly sat down. He didn't say another word. The rest of the lunch was subdued. People talked in low voices. Robert left early, muttering something about a headache. But something had changed. After most of the guests had drifted away, Sarah came over to me. She didn't say anything. She just wrapped her arms around me in a hug that was different from any hug she'd ever given me. It was tight and full of a new understanding. It was an apology and a thank you, all without a single word. Maya stood nearby, looking a little scared now that the adrenaline had worn off, but she held her head high. And I realized, sitting there with my daughters, that the public victory, the humiliation of my exuspend, that wasn't the important part. The important part Was this quiet, this new space between us? It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen, by the people who mattered most. The years of feeling invisible, where over the truth hadn't just set me free, it had rewoven the fabric of our family, pulling the three of us together into a new, stronger pattern. The recognition I had craved wasn't in the applause of a crowd, it was in the silent, firm hug from my daughter, and in the defiant, loving stand of my youngest. That was everything, that was better than any spotlight. After the hearing in the hallway, it happened. My older daughter finally confronted him. Her voice was low, trembling with a fury I'd never heard. "You lied to me," she said. "You made me think she was the problem all this time. It was you." He tried to bluster to explain it away, but the truth was out. She just shook her head, took a step back from him, and looked at me. Her eyes were full of a terrible, clear understanding and shame, so much shame she didn't say anything to me. She just turned and walked away down the long, echoing corridor. She went to her father's car, but she didn't get in. She just stood there waiting for me. The reconciliation wasn't instant. It was a slow, painful thaw. There were months of therapy. There were angry outbursts, tears, long silences. She had to grieve the father she thought she had. She had to face the fact that she had participated in hurting me and hurting her sister. It was messy and hard, but for the first time it was honest. We were building something real, not on promises and presents, but on the difficult, unglamorous foundation of truth. The justice we got that day wasn't really about the custody agreement. It was about something deeper. It was about the restoration of a mother's integrity in her children's eyes. It was about my younger daughter no longer having to hide her pain. It was about my older daughter waking up from a beautiful, poisonous dream. He could keep his wealth, his high-rise, his empty promises. I got my daughter's back, and that was the only verdict that ever mattered. The house was so quiet after he left, not a peaceful quiet, a heavy quiet, a waiting quiet, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. My eldest, Chloe, she built a wall around herself, brick by brick. I'd tried to talk to her, to ask about her day, and she'd just stare right through me. Her answers were clipped cold. It was like living with a ghost of my own daughter. And my ex, he was an expert at the slow drip of poison. A comment here about how I was always so stressed, a suggestion there that the divorce was my choice alone, my inability to just move on. He painted a picture of me as this bitter, unstable woman. And Chloe, she was holding the frame for him. The endless, glamorous vacation. And there was Lily, my youngest. She was only 9. She didn't build a wall, she curled inward. She started having these terrible nightmares. I'd wake up to her screams, find her shivering in her bed, her sheets tangled. She'd cling to me, but she wouldn't tell me what she dreamed about during the day. She was just quiet, anxious. She'd jump at the sound of a car door slamming outside. When her father came to pick them up for his weekends, she'd get this look in her eyes, a kind of panicked resignation. I asked her, of course I did. "Is everything okay at Dad's, sweetie? You can tell me anything." And she'd just nod, her eyes darting away from mine. "It's fine, Mommy." But it wasn't fine. I could feel it. I just didn't know what it was. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. It was raining. I remember the sound of it hitting the windows, a steady, dismal rhythm. Chloe was 16, all sharp edges and simmering anger. She'd been looking for a fight all week. It started over something trivial. I don't even remember what, a messy room, a missed curfew. But it escalated so quickly, her voice rising, mine trying to match it, to be heard over the storm of her fury. And then she said it, the words I'd been dreading. "I can't stand it here anymore. I am done. I'm calling Dad. I am moving in with him full time." It felt like a physical blow. The air just left the room. "Chloe, you can't be serious. This is your home." Home, she spat the word out. "This isn't a home. It's a museum of your misery. All you do is mope around and complain about Dad. He was right about you. He said you'd try to turn us against him. He said you'd never let go." That was it. The accusation broke me. All the frustration, the loneliness, the sheer unfairness of it, all boiled over. "He's poisoned you against me," I shouted, my voice cracking. "Can't you see that he's told you just enough of his twisted version of the truth to make you hate me? He's a manipulator, Chloe." And that's when I saw her, Lily, standing in the doorway to the living room. She was frozen, her small face pale, her eyes wide with terror. She'd heard everything, the shouting, the venom. She was clutching her worn-out teddy bear, her knuckles white. Chloe barely glanced at her. "See," Chloe said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Look at you, you're hysterical. You're proving his point." She turned and marched toward the stairs. "I am packing. I am leaving tonight." I stood there trembling, utterly defeated. I'd played right into his hands. I'd become the exact portrait he'd painted of me. I watched Lily shrink back into the hallway shadows. As Chloe stomped past her, the sound of drawers slamming shut upstairs was like gunshots. I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed. This was it. I was losing my daughter. I was losing everything. The distance grew. Our conversations became polite surface level. She'd be physically here, but her mind was there in that golden world he'd built for her. She started picking up his phrases, his way of dismissing my concerns. "You're just jealous, Mom. Dad says you've always been dramatic. Why can't you just be happy for me?" Every time I tried to talk about my feelings about missing her, it backfired. It just pushed her further away. I was becoming a stranger in my own daughter's life. An inconvenient reminder. Then a small movement caught my eye. Lily, my quiet, anxious. Lily was creeping up the stairs. I heard her footsteps on the creaky board. At the top I heard Chloe's bedroom door open. There was a murmur of voices. Chloe's impatient. What, Lily? Not now. But Lily didn't leave. I couldn't hear her words, just the soft, persistent murmur of her voice. Then silence, a long, heavy silence from upstairs. The slamming had stopped. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs, not daring to breathe. After a minute, I heard them come out of the room. They came down the stairs together, slowly. Chloe was first. But she wasn't the same girl who had marched up there. The anger was gone. Her face was ashen. Her eyes were huge, filled with a horror I had never seen in anyone, let alone my confident 16-year-old. She looked shattered. Lily was behind her, holding onto the hem of Chloe's sweater, her head bowed. They stopped on the bottom step, standing together, facing me. The air in the hallway was thick, charged with something I couldn't name. Chloe's voice was a ragged whisper when she spoke. "Mom." I just looked at her, waiting. Her eyes filled with tears. "Lily just told me something." She swallowed hard, her throat working. She looked down at her little sister, and her expression shifted from horror to a fierce, blazing protectiveness. She put her arm around Lily, pulling her close. "What?" I asked, my own voice, barely a whisper. "What did she tell you?" Chloe looked back at me, and the truth was right there in her eyes, a truth so awful it had stripped all the anger away. "He hurts me." The words weren't from Chloe, they were a tiny, muffled whisper from Lily, spoken into Chloe's side. 3 words. 3 simple, devastating words. They didn't just hang in the air, they crashed into me, into the foundation of our lives, and shattered it. Of a simpler, less exciting reality. Everything tilted, every worry, every unexplained nightmare, every moment of fear, every anxious glance, it all snapped into a terrible, horrifying focus. The custody battle, the arguments, the alienation. It was all a smokescreen, a monstrous distraction from the real crime happening in the shadows. Chloe dropped to her knees right there on the stairs, turning to face Lily, clutching her small shoulders. "He hurts you, Dad. How? What did he do?" Her voice was urgent, but soft, so soft. "And the dam broke." Lily, my brave little girl, started to talk. "It wasn't physical," she whispered, "not hits. It was worse in a way. It was the words, the constant criticisms. Nothing she did was ever good enough. Her drawings were silly." Her voice was annoying. "She was too sensitive." He'd mock her for crying. He'd tell her she was just like me, emotional and weak. He'd isolate her during their weekends, ignoring her for hours on end, then getting angry if she tried to interrupt him. He created a world where she felt small and worthless and utterly alone. The birthday party where he'd promised to take them to the zoo, but spent the entire day on the phone, leaving Lily watching cartoons by herself, while Chloe was out with friends. The time she'd practiced a song for the school concert for weeks, and when she sang it for him, he'd laughed and said she was tone deaf. The way he'd look at her, with such disdain, a look that said she was a disappointment, a burden. Chloe listened, her tears falling freely. Now all this time, she sobbed, pulling Lily into a crushing hug. "All this time, I thought he was the good one. And I was so angry at Mom. I was leaving you here with her. I was going to leave you alone with him." The realization of what she had almost done broke her completely. "I am so sorry, Lily. I am so sorry. I didn't know. I promise I will never let him hurt you again, never." I watched them, my 2 girls, clinging to each other on the staircase. The division between them was gone. The wall Chloe had built hadn't just crumbled, it had been vaporized by a shared terrible truth. The fight was over, the argument about who was right, who was to blame for the divorce. It was meaningless noise now. I walked over and knelt with them, wrapping my arms around both of them. We were a huddle on the floor, a unit reforged in pain. "You are safe now," I said, my voice firm for the first time in years. "You are both safe. He will never ever hurt either of you again." The focus of my life shifted in an instant. It wasn't about winning a custody battle. Anymore, it wasn't about proving I was a good mother, or that he was a bad father. It was about protection, it was about safety. It was about healing the wounds he had inflicted on my youngest, and the guilt he had manipulated onto my eldest. We sat there for a long time, just holding each other. The rain had stopped, the house was quiet again. But this quiet was different. It wasn't a waiting quiet anymore. It was the quiet of a storm, that has passed, the quiet of exhaustion, but also the quiet of a new beginning. The battle lines had been redrawn, and we were finally all on the same side. The decision to go back to court was the most terrifying choice I've ever made. My lawyer was a kind woman, but pragmatic. She warned me. She said family courts don't like to disrupt a child's routine, especially a teenager's stated preferences. She said his resources gave him a powerful advantage. He could drag this out, bury us in legal fees. He could paint me as bitter as the parent trying to sabotage a good relationship. And I knew in my soul that filing those papers would be the final straw for my. The screen glows in the quiet dimness of the evening. Another notification pops up. It's from your sister's account. I tap it. And there, you both are grinning under the bright lights of some new fancy restaurant. His arm is slung around her shoulders. The caption reads, "Celebrating the best dad, ever so grateful for all he does for us. Dad goals blessed." My thumb scrolls down. It's a cascade of it. A photo of a brand new laptop. Dad surprised me just because he's the most generous person I know. A video of the two of them at a concert, his face beaming with pride. Every post is a performance, a perfectly staged scene of a happy father and his adoring daughter. And I sit here in the house where we all used to live, and I feel the distance like a physical chill. She lives with me, but her life, the one she showcases, is with him. The comments pour in from family, from friends. What an amazing father, he's such a rock for those girls. Each one is like a tiny paper cut. They see the curated reality, the expensive gifts, the staged smiles. They don't see the silence that falls over her when she comes home from a weekend at his place. They don't see the way she avoids my eyes when I ask how it went. It's a public betrayal, a narrative he's crafting with her as an unwilling or perhaps a willing accomplice. He's buying her loyalty, and she's posting the receipts for the whole world to see. It's designed to humiliate me, to prove what a failure I was, what a success he is. And I feel so helpless against it. How do you fight a ghost? How do you combat a story that everyone else is so eager to believe? And then, there's you, my quiet one. You refuse to play the game. You have a phone, but your profiles are dormant. There are no glowing posts about your dad. When your sister tries to include you in a photo, you shrink away. I see the resentment in your eyes, a quiet storm brewing. It's not the flashy anger of a teenager, it's something deeper, something sadder. I noticed the change in you first. Your grades, once so bright, started to slip. A B became a C. Then a D. Your teacher emailed concerned. You stopped seeing your friends, the invitations to go to the mall, to the movies. They just stopped coming. You'd retreat to your room, the door clicking shut. And the house would grow heavy with your silence. It'd ask you what was wrong, and you just shrug. Nothing, Mom, I am fine. One evening, you were working on a history project. You'd left your laptop open on the kitchen table. While you went to get a drink, a message flashed on the screen from a school portal, something about a missed assignment. I sat down to see what it was, my heart sinking. I opened the browser to log in, and that's when I saw it. The search history was still open. It wasn't filled with usual things. There were no music videos, no fashion sites. It was a list of quiet, desperate questions. Why is my dad always angry with me? Is it my fault my parents got divorced? Signs of anxiety in teenagers. How to stop feeling scared all the time. What to do when you feel like you're walking on eggshells. My breath caught in my throat. The words on the screen were so much louder than any silence. This was the truth. This was the reality behind your sister's glittering facade. I closed the laptop. Just as you came back into the room, you saw my face. And you knew the pretense collapsed. I didn't yell. I just asked as gently as I could, "Sweetheart, what's happening when you're at your dad's?" Daughter, she would see it as an attack on her father, on her new life. I signed the forms with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. I was choosing the chance, the slimmest chance of getting my daughter back, over the certainty of keeping whatever fragile connection we had left. It felt like setting a bomb, and not knowing if it would blow open a door or just destroy everything. The tears started then. They weren't loud, dramatic sobs. They were quiet, hopeless tears that tracked silently down your cheeks. You talked about the constant criticism, how nothing you did was ever good enough, your grades, were never high enough your room, was never clean enough your tone, was always wrong you talked about the silence, that was worse than the shouting the way he would withdraw for days leaving you, in a cold silent apartment trying to figure out what you'd done wrong. You said you felt like you were constantly bracing for impact, waiting for the next comment, the next sigh of disappointment. The expensive gifts your sister posted about, they were apologies, you said, empty gestures that felt more like payments for his bad behavior than acts of love. From that moment on, things changed. My helplessness hardened into a quiet, fierce resolve. I couldn't control the narrative online, but I could document the truth offline. I started keeping a record. It felt clinical at first, wrong almost, but it was necessary. I noted the dates every Sunday evening. After I'd pick you up from his place, I'd write down what I saw. January 15th, quiet, withdrawn, ate dinner in silence, went straight to bed, mentioned a headache. February 2nd, anxiety attack, in the kitchen, shaking, couldn't catch her breath, said it started after he criticized her college application essay. I encouraged you to write too. I bought you a simple, beautiful notebook with a lock and key. I told you it was a place to put the feelings, to get them out of your head and onto paper, where they couldn't hurt you as much. You started filling its pages. You'd let me read some of it. Your words were so raw, so much more articulate than your spoken ones. You described the feeling of your chest tightening when his car pulled into the driveway, the dread of dinner conversation, the way you'd rehearse sentences in your head, trying to make them perfect, only to have them fall apart the moment you spoke. The contrast became unbearable. My phone would buzz with your sister's latest post, a picture of the two of them on a ski trip. All smile, send. I'd look up at you curled on the sofa, scribbling in your journal, your brow furrowed with a worry. No 16-year-old should have the digital deception and the private pain existing side by side. My goal was to attack your sister. It was to prove a point to the world. It was simpler and more important than that. It was to protect you. The reckoning had to happen. I asked your sister to come over one afternoon, telling her I needed to talk about something important. She arrived, her phone in her hand, probably expecting to hear about a bill or a schedule change. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured her a coffee. I was calm. I told her I was worried about you. I told her I'd discovered some things that were very concerning. She was defensive immediately. What is she complaining about? Dad, he does so much for us. She's just being a moody teenager. I didn't argue. I just slid my own notebook across the table. I showed her the dates, the observations. Then I handed her your journal. I told her you'd given me permission. Read it, I said gently, just read a little. She scoffed at first, scrolling through the pages with a dismissive flick of her thumb. But then her scrolling slowed. She stopped. I watched the expression on her face change. The defensiveness melted away, replaced by a frown of concentration. Then confusion. She read a passage about the college essay, the one she'd seen him help you with, the one he'd bragged about to his friends. She read your description of his help, the way he'd torn apart your first draft, calling your ideas immature, your writing sloppy, until you were left. The courtroom was nothing like on television. It was smaller, quieter, and the air felt heavy, like it was absorbing all the sadness in the room. The wood paneling was dark and somber. We sat at separate tables, him with his high-priced attorney, in a suit that cost more than my car, me with my kind, pragmatic lawyer. He didn't even look at me. He had this calm, almost bored expression, like this was a minor inconvenience. He was so sure of his victory. Tears, feeling stupid and small. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. But he told me he spent hours helping her, he said. She was so grateful. I just nodded. I didn't say anything. The evidence was speaking for itself. Her own memories started to surface. I could see it in her face, the times his generosity had felt conditional, the gifts that arrived after a particularly bad argument, the way he'd speak to her mother, to me, with a dismissive edge shed. Learned to ignore. She had been viewing everything through the filter shed created the best Dad ever filter, and it was cracking. She spent over an hour reading that journal. She cried quiet tears of shame and realization she hadn't known. She had been so busy playing her part in the public story that she'd become blind to the private suffering happening right beside her. She had been so desperate for his approval, for the picture-perfect family, that she'd failed to see her own sister drowning. She picked up her phone for a moment. I thought she was going to call him to confront him, but she didn't. She opened her social media app. She went straight to the best dad ever post, the one with the restaurant photo. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then with a few quick taps, it was gone, deleted. She sat for a long moment staring at the blank space where the post had been. Then she started typing again. She wrote a new post. It was simple, there was no photo. It just said family isn't about the pictures you post, it's about showing up for each other, especially when it's hard. I see you now, sis, I am here, I love you. She tagged you in it. Then she put her phone down and looked at me. And for the first time in years, I saw my eldest daughter, not a performer. The filter was off, the charade was over, the battle wasn't won, not completely, he was still who he was. But the unity he had fractured was beginning slowly to mend. It started with a search history, and it ended with a deleted post. And in the quiet of the kitchen, I finally felt the helplessness begin to lift, replaced by the fragile, powerful hope that the truth, however painful, was always stronger than the most perfect lie. The silence in my house is a physical thing. Now it is weight, it presses down on the furniture. It fills the spaces between the books on the shelves. It's the silence of a phone that never rings, of a text message that will never come. My daughter hasn't spoken to me in over a year, not a real word. Anyway, all communication flows through my exusband. Now hell send a clipped email about her college tuition or a holiday schedule. It's always we this, and we that, we have decided. We will be there. There is no we for me anymore. I am a committee of one sitting in this quiet house, trying to remember what her voice sounds like. Family gatherings have become a special kind of torture. Last Thanksgiving, she came to my parents' house. Because it's tradition, but she might as well have been a ghost. She spoke to everyone but me. She laughed with her cousins. She helped my mother in the kitchen. She even had a long, animated conversation with my father about his garden. But when I walked into the room, the laughter would die down. She'd find a reason to leave. I'd try to catch her eye, to offer a smile, but she'd look right through me. It was like I was made of. His lawyer presented their narrative. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. I was described as unstable, still struggling emotionally from the divorce. My modest income was framed as an inability to provide a suitable standard of living. My concerns were unfounded anxieties. He painted a picture of a devoted father offering his daughter every opportunity, and a mother who wanted to stifle that out of jealousy. It was brutal, it was clever, and it was working. I could see it in the judge's neutral face. Glass. The worst part was watching her with him, with my exusband. She hangs on his every word. She laughs at his jokes, a little too loudly. She has built him a throne in her mind, and she polishes it every single day. And me, I am the villain in the story he's written for her, the reason for all his unhappiness, the obstacle to their perfect father-daughter bond. My younger daughter Sarah, she sees it. She's still in high school, so she lives with me most of the time. I see the strain in her eyes. She's caught in this terrible tug-of-war. She'll have a nice day with me, well, go see a movie or bake something, and then her phone will buzz. It's her sister, and I can see the guilt wash over her face. She'll take the call in another room, her voice hushed. She loves me, I know she does, but the pressure from the other side is immense. She's trying to keep a foot in both worlds, and it's tearing her apart. My own parents are just confused. They see their eldest granddaughter, this bright, beautiful young woman, treating their own daughter like a stranger. They don't understand the history that's been rewritten. They just see the pain it causes. And it hurts them too. The whole family feels fractured like a pane of glass, with a crack running right through the middle. Then my mother called. She has a quiet strength about her, a way of seeing the heart of a problem without you having to spell it out. She said she missed the girls and wanted them to come for a weekend. Just the two of them, no parents, no pressure. She said it would be good for them to have some time away. I was hesitant, I was afraid. It would just be another opportunity for my eldest to reinforce her distance, to pull Sarah further into her camp. But my mother was insistent. She said, trust me, just let me have my granddaughters for a couple of days. So I packed their bags, I hugged Sarah tight, and I gave my eldest a careful, neutral smile. As she got into the car, she didn't smile back. My mother's house has always been a sanctuary. It smells like lavender and old books. That weekend, she made it especially warm. She baked their favorite cookies. She had fresh flowers in every room. She didn't mention the tension. Not once. She didn't ask any probing questions. She just let them be. She created a space that felt safe, separate from the battlefields of our daily lives. On the second evening, after a day of puttering in the garden and playing cards, she brought out a large, dusty cardboard box. I was cleaning out the attic, she said casually. I found some old things I thought you might like to see. She started with the photo albums, the big heavy ones with the black pages, and the little white corners holding the pictures in place. She'd lay one on the coffee table between them, and they'd all lean over it. There were pictures of me as a little girl, pictures of them as babies. My mother would point and tell a story. This was your mother's 5th birthday. She insisted on wearing that fairy costume for a solid week. My eldest daughter Claire was quiet at first. She looked at the pictures with a kind of detached curiosity, like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. But then my mother brought out the projector and the old reels of film. She set up a screen in the living room, pulling the curtains, closed the clicker of the projector starting up. Was a sound from another lifetime. The first images were shaky, bathed in that warm, slightly faded color of old film. It was me, maybe 7 years old, trying to ride a bike. Without training wheels, my father was running behind me holding the seat. You could hear my mother's voice from behind the camera laughing, encouraging me. Claire and Sarah watched, sipping their tea. Then the film cut to a later scene. It was